Welcome to this lecture. So in the previous lecture we just started making our payload. We just saw how we can just send and receive. We have already seen here, so we haven't instantiated this connection global variable yet. We'll do in a minute. We saw how to create the socket. We have already seen getting the optionals or basically argument to this socket API call, and this was to catch the exception if there is any. So next one is to bind to that address family, and we saw how we can accept that connection. So next thing, now what we want to do is use the multi-threading in our programming. We have seen about the multi-threadings and how to create the threads in the previous lectures. If you haven't checked it out, make sure you just check that out, because I have shown you there how the different processes can run simultaneously with the help of threads. So using the threads in our backdoor is the main purpose of doing simultaneous things together. So there will be multiple things that is going on with our backdoor. That is, it will just listen the connection, it will just execute some of these receive send command simultaneously. So instead of being lag in our programming, we can make use of this multi-threading technique so as to support different processes running together. So why not to do that if our CPU or processor is capable of doing that? If our processor was not capable of doing that, so scenario would be different, but obviously our processor is very fast. That means we can use multiple support of the threads. So let's see how we can just do that. So we have already seen that we have already just created this bunch of attributes in the previous lecture. We saw how we can just get these threads. So this is the minimum thread we are using, 2 threads. This is the jobs to do, and next one is we just instantiated this queue in order to do different jobs together. So let's see. So this is our multi-threading. So here what I want to do is I want to define the job now. So I'll just say work. So this will be my method and it will do job in the queue. So there will be the queue, and our job will be just taken into that queue from the beginning to the end, and it will do one job at a time, because we know that queue has only access to the last element, because it is basically in the work sense of first in and first out, which is basically our FIFO, which is if you insert first, then it is going to get out at the first. That means whatever you just write at the first will be executed at the first from this queue. So let's see how we can do that. So first of all, I'll just make this infinite loop, because we want work to be done continuously, because we'll just make a program that will just do multiple tasks, maybe taking a screenshot, maybe reading a file, maybe giving a message to the client, or opening web browser in the client, maybe sorting down the client computer. So that will be done multiple times, so that we have to make use of this queue. So let's see first what we need to do. So I'll just create this int value attribute over here, because we want to get that queue first, and this is the way to get the queue element. So next is to check the integer value. So I'll just say integer value, and if it is the 1, then first of all what you need to do is you have to create the socket. So that is first things we are doing, that is creating a socket. That means we have to establish a connection. Next thing what you want to do is, obviously you should have guessed, that is binding that connection, and next thing is accepting that connection. So if there is any task that is to be done, first of all we'll just create that socket, bind and accept, which is the address family connection of the socket module. So elif integer value, let me say integer value is 2. So why 1 or 2? So if you have guessed here, we have the jobs, that is array, that is 1 and 2. So we are just saying that there can be the 2 jobs, and we'll do that job based on that queue. So next thing is, I'll just make again the loop inside here to check the time. So first of all we are just saying that okay, we have just imported the time. So I'll just sleep this for a moment, because maybe we have the first task to do. So I'll just say okay, for 0.2 seconds just sleep, and after that now it's time to check the addresses. So I'll just say if len of array addresses is maybe greater than 0. So if there is one addresses, at least I'm going to break for now, but here we have to get some menu, which will be the menu or tasks that user want to do. So for now I'll just keep in this comment out, but we have to just implement this main menu for now. So this will be your main menu, which should be called, if there is any addresses, that is we have to give the menu to the user, and I have to tell to the user that what they want to just get. So basically we are doing this job. So let's go over here and let's see that what we can do next is we have to call this queue, and we have to say that task is done. So this is the method, because for each of these attribute we have to do this 2 times. So I'll just say queue dot task done one more time, and now we have to just exit from here. So I'll just say exit, and the status code will be 0 in order to exit. So what we just did here was we just did the job in the queue. So whatever there is in the queue, we have just done that. If there was one, basically we created the connection. This 2 is for the menu. So menu is basically to do some tasks. Maybe it will be something like taking a screenshot of client, or basically giving a message, or opening a browser. So these 2 or 2 integer represents that task. So if there is a 2 tasks, that means we'll just get main menu, which will just represents the tasks that user want to do on the client, and basically this is the way to represent your work. So next thing is very important in the multi-threading, and now let's do that. And the first thing I want to do over here before this work is to create the threads. So let's define that method. So I'll just say create me that threads. So if you see, this work was just completed over here, this function, but if you just see, we haven't called this work method anywhere. So that should be done inside this thread, because work is done in the thread. So first of all, we'll just create the thread, and we'll just pass this work to that thread. So for, okay, I'll just go down again, and for in range maybe of integer threads, because we have given the 2 threads, that means we'll just create the 2 threads. So it will just loop in that thread, which is basically going to be the list 1 and 2 elements. And after that I want to just make object thread. So basically this will be the thread of object. You know how to create it. It is from this threading module and thread class. So if you haven't seen this, check out the documentation. And let me just go back here. Let me show you the documentation of threading. So this is the official documentation of the threading, and you could see down here it will have these threads. So this is the thread class, and this is going to be called with this group, which is the optional, and the target is also the optional, but we are going to execute something over here. So this is very important. Target is something you want to execute with this thread. So you could see now back to our PyCharm, and here what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give the target to be some value, and that will be your work method to be called. So what we just did here, we just made use of thread, which is basically getting this thread, one thread, and one at a time we are just working with this module. So next thing is to create the daemon. So what this daemon means is to execute our main thread. So I'll just say true. Okay, true. So next thing is to start our thread, and you know how to start. It is not by the run method, it is using this start command. We have seen how to execute our thread in the previous lecture. If you haven't seen that, please make sure you see first that lecture where I have shown you what is the use of the threads, and basically we saw how simultaneous program can be executed with a time sharing techniques of a processor. So next thing is let's go over here and let's join that is joining the queue. So that is all about these create threads. So the last method we have is to create the jobs. So let's define here. So I'll just create jobs. So this is all about the multi-threading. So for, if you just remember, we have also created here the empty list, or basically the list for the array jobs, which was 1 and 2. So based on that, we'll just loop on that first. So I'll just say integer threads in that array job, which is going to give us 1 and 2. So there I want to put that into the queue. So in order to put that, I have to say that int threads, which was 1 and 2 element, was put in the queue, and we'll just loop on that queue, and based on that we'll just do these tasks. And basically we just did here is put that thread into the queue. So next thing is to join that queue again, and let's see, I'll just say join. So this is all. So what we just did, we just created the job, we just put the thread ID into the list. This is this thread ID. So we just say that we have the thread ID that is to be put into this list or a queue. So next thing is to call this to method. So let's see, we have to call first this create threads method, and after that you have to call create job method. So this is all about the multi-threading. What we just did here was we just made this work method to be called with this thread, and each time we have to make use of this queue to do that. So this is all about the multi-threading. We saw how we can just use the simultaneous time sharing technique of a processor in order to do multiple tasks. So this will be wrap for this lecture. In the next lecture, we'll just list out some of the connection. We'll go to the client part and we'll just execute our program to see all the connections, and we'll just simultaneously add some of the operations like taking a screenshots or making client to log their PC away and something like that. So that will be covered in the upcoming lecture. See you in the next one.